Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? A lot of times we get the advice to do what you love, even from people like me. But what if you're terrible at all the things that you love? What then? I got a comment on one of my short videos recently that made me sad. It made me empathetic because I understood where this person was coming from, or at least I think I understood where they're coming from, because I could relate to a lot of what they said. And they talked about this idea, well, what if you've tried all your life to do these things that you love and you're terrible at them and you've just failed at this? What then? What do you do? And we had a dialogue of sorts back and forth, if you can have a dialogue through comments on a YouTube short. And it was really clear that this person's in a very bad place and they're not willing to talk so much as be upset and be angry and be in pain. And I get that. I've been there. I am not casting any kind of judgment. It's just kind of the impression that I got. But it made me look at the bigger picture. In terms of like what happens with us, because I can relate to a lot of what they said. As a kid and as an adult, I found many things that I was really passionate about, that I really loved, that I wanted to be able to do and to do well. I wanted to be involved with them, not just look at them and see them and experience them. I wanted to be the one doing these things. And very often I found that some of these things came easily to me and some of them were difficult. And a lot of times I wrapped up a lot of my identity with my ability to do these things. I mean, initially I was just the smart kid or one of the smart kids in the class. And what happens is at some point, you find out there's people that are better than you are. They're kids that are smarter than you are. Or you find these things that you're trying to do that you really like, and you're just not that good at them. Or they come harder to you than they come to somebody else. And, comparison is the thief of joy. I don't remember exactly where I heard that the first time, but it's true. I started to compare myself to these other people, maybe the kid that can draw better than I could, or the kid that was a better musician than I was, or the person that was much smarter than I was, and where, different subjects came easier to them, ones that I really cared about. And that was really, really painful because it really kind of wounded me at my sense of self. Like I felt like there was something wrong with me. And here are these things that I really care about that float my boat, that the things I love, and I'm just not as good at them as somebody else is. And it made me feel like I just wasn't good at them at all. I still fight that now all the time. I see these bass virtuosos or people that are really good at some kind of groove or whatever, and I can't quite do that, and it makes me feel as though I'm a complete failure at playing the bass, even though I've been doing it for years and I can hold my own. And in things like role-playing games, it was wonderful to expand my horizons and meet all these other people. But when you talk to people like my friend Anthony, Runeslinger, and, man, sometimes he comes up with these things and says, I'm like, man, I can't believe I didn't think of that. And it's like, man, he's a lot smarter than I am. And he's just one of these dudes that this happens with. I'm like, man, I can't believe it that, they're so much better, because that's what the feeling is. They're so much better at this than I am. And I could name a whole bunch of other things. My friend Bree is great at just one-liners and coming up with things right, spontaneously, where I'm kind of searching for words. And there's people that are just so much better at intellectual pursuits and can put the pieces together faster than I can, or see something a little bit differently. And, it makes me feel as though I'm worthless, because if I'm not the best, or if I'm not one of the best, then I'm not worth anything at all, which is an insane belief, but it's something that's been drilled into me and by learning that failure was not an option as a kid and all the usual childhood trauma. And being ostracized as a kid because I was a little different. So I clung on to these things that I was good at. And, later on, finding out that I'm not as good as I thought I was made me feel as though I completely suck. Or putting it a different way, if I try to do something I really love and it's really hard, then I feel like I'm absolutely no good. I completely suck. And that is insane, but that's a belief that a lot of us struggle with. And because of that, a lot of times we just don't do the things that we love. Or when we do them, it brings us more pain than joy, and that is tragic. There's a few things that have helped me kind of get over that, or it's still a process of getting over that. And the first thing is like trying to get to the root of like these beliefs, because a lot of times it's this trauma. It's this stuff that pervades my entire belief system about the world. And that can be really tough to ferret out. But that's something that colors everything in our lives if we deal with that. And finding out where that comes from, starting to dealing with that through therapy or whatever means you need to get to the root of that, can really help because that starts to unpack those kind of beliefs. And, at least in my case, it's been really helpful. The second thing is to start to look at maybe you're not as bad as you think you are. Because there is this critic, this internal critic that I have. I don't know if you have it, but a lot of people have it. And it is brutal. And it tears down every little thing that I do, throughout the day, not just doing the things that I love. When I play the bass, I play a role-playing game, I write something, I make a YouTube video because I love making YouTube videos. It will tear these things apart. I mean, man, I talk about the thief of joy. I look at these other videos that people are making, and I think to myself, oh my God, I suck. They're so much better than I am. They're so much more polished, or they're so much better spoken, or they're so much more insightful than I am, and I totally suck. And this inner critic is brutal. It is relentless. And very often, we get some feedback from some other people, or we're able to, one of the greatest things I've had happen is listening to recordings of gigs that I've been on where I thought, man, I'm really blowing it tonight. And then listen back, I was like, oh, that's pretty groovy. I'm doing pretty good. And the whole band is really cooking. But it didn't seem like that at the time. But we're often we just get so critical with ourselves. I do anyway, that, I don't give myself enough credit. And other people are like, dude, you're a lot better than you think you are. You belong here, because so much of the time I feel like I don't belong in a group of people. I feel that way in my gaming groups. With these people I've known for years. I feel that way in bands that I helped put together, like founding member, for decades now. I feel like I'm the odd man out. I always have that feeling. And a lot of times people say, well, listen, you belong, dude. And, you're good at this. You're better at this than you think you are. And, it even happened with me in recovery groups where we're getting together to get better. So that's another part of the puzzle. And the third one is, when you're doing what you love, you do it because you love it. You don't have to be the best at it. And I can be hypercritical as a musician that's been out for a lot of times, but I know people that they sit there and they play guitar and they sing and they go to open mics and they have a blast. And they're not the best at it and they don't care. They're just having fun. Susan is great at singing, but she sings all day long. And, it makes her happy. It makes me happy to play the bass. It makes me happy to play role-playing games or talk about them. It makes me happy to drive into these intellectual pursuits or conversations with other people about, all kinds of subjects. It makes me happy making YouTube videos. I like this whole process. I like, kind of putting stuff out there and, the whole act of creating it, coming up with something and doing it, because I really enjoy this. And, okay, well, even if I suck, it's still something I like doing. It's still worth doing. Anything that's worth doing well is worth doing poorly, I heard somebody say one time. And yeah, it's true. If you really enjoy this, freaking go do it. And that's not a platitude. That's not me trying to put a Band-Aid on something. I'm saying, life is tough. Life is hard. I am not going to bullshit you. Life can be really, really difficult. And, when I would talking to this person, in the comments, I can tell that's weighing heavily upon them. And I get it. This is not the most fun time to be alive. It's not 30 years war bad, but it's an interesting time in history, and interesting times are not always good. May you live in interesting times. That was kind of a curse. I get all that, but man, so it's not a platitude, but there are things in life that you love that make life worth living. Go do those things. Stop being such a harsh judge on yourself, which I know is incredibly hard. But start doing things because, they bring you joy. And if you suck at them, do it anyway. Who cares? As long as you're happy doing them, that's a win. That's a win. And so, yeah, that, I'm still kind of thinking a lot about that comment, about that interaction and the feeling that person has and just how much I could relate to it. But knowing that a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people just, they see all these images on social media or TV or whatever, and they hold up perfection. And we're trying to compete with that. There's always a bigger fish. But your worth isn't being the biggest fish. Your worth isn't being you. Doing what you care about, living your life authentically, not hiding and making yourself small. Because I did that for way too freaking long. I am done doing that. And if you've done that, get done doing it. Live out loud. You know what I mean? Hopefully this made some sense to you. It made sense to me. I would love to hear your comments and reactions on this, because this is a difficult subject. This isn't like a surface level conversation. This more of a deep subject, something to think about. And so I'd love to hear your comments on this and what you think about this. And as always, if you want to support the channel, there's all various ways to do that. I appreciate that very much. And I'll talk to you later.